Hi, I'm Ashley, and 1 year ago I had a breast reduction. Here's my road to reduction. Welcome to episode 8, Estee. In the last episode, we covered materials to prep going into surgery. Today, we're going to discuss surgery morning. And a warning, this will probably get emotional. So, as I mentioned in prior podcasts, I have a pretty well-documented case of medical PTSD. Going into surgery, I had been in therapy for many months, working on strategies to calm it down, to take control of it, to just kind of manage the stress of that on top of the normal stress of a surgery. So needless to say, the night before surgery, I did not get much sleep. I think I probably slept 2 hours as my longest stretch. I kept sleeping and having nightmares and waking up, and then I would listen to music or watch something on TV or YouTube to distract me, and then fall asleep for a little bit more and do it all again. I was not excited when morning came, and morning came really early. So my surgery was scheduled for 7, and the office had said that I needed to be there by 6:30 at the latest. And so my parents live a little bit away from me, and they were the ones driving me that day. So they show up pretty early so we could get there, and my family is full of chronically early people, which, you know, if you're not early, you're late in my family, and that's fine, except the day of surgery when all you have to do is sit and wait. So I figured I'd have a lot of time to burn when we got there, and I had packed myself a book and my iPod in my surgery bag. They had asked you to bring some comfy clothes if you weren't already wearing them, and I just brought some items of comfort for me because I knew that would help with my PTSD. Meanwhile, my parents had also packed snacks and stuff because they know they would be there for a while. So we got there early, went in, and I figured I'd have time to sit. We checked in, I sat in the waiting room with my parents, and I no more than got my butt on the chair when they were like, "Okay, we're ready for you out back." That was quicker than I anticipated, so I grabbed my surgery bag, I had it out back, and the first thing they had me do was change into a Johnny, which typically the opening in a Johnny is in the back. This time it was in the front, so I put my Johnny on backwards, by all standards, so they could have access to the front to do anything they needed to. And then the bay I was put in, because there weren't separate rooms out back in the recovery area, which is where I started, there were bays, so I stored my stuff in my bay, and there was a recliner and a couple of chairs and a bed there. And so she asked me to sit in the recliner, so I sat in the recliner, and she took my blood pressure. And if you've been following prior episodes, you'll know that the blood pressure was an issue with my medical PTSD. I was getting stroke level blood pressures at my 2-week out pre-op appointment. So I had been chasing lower numbers for a few weeks, and while taking anxiety meds for a few weeks had lowered the numbers, I knew they still weren't great. And I knew that the numbers I was getting at home would be nothing to the numbers that I would have that morning. So she took it and didn't really say anything, and I said, "How bad is it?" And she said, "Nothing to worry about. We'll take it again in a few minutes," which is not what you tell me, because that doesn't make me go any lower. It just makes the numbers go up. So I took a moment to tell her that. I told her I had medical PTSD, and that manifested as white coat syndrome, and that, you know, taking it again, waiting to take it again, usually led to higher numbers. And she was very receptive. This nurse was phenomenal. And she said that that's okay, that she's going to go talk to the anesthesiologist and see what he thinks and what he can do. So at this moment, I'm by myself in the recovery area, and I'm really convinced that this nurse is going to the anesthesiologist to tell him that we can't do it, or to tell him that I can't be the first appointment because we need to let me calm down. And I knew if that happened, I would never calm down. So she comes back and asks me about my medical PTSD. And she just, she was just honestly curious. She sat on the bed across from me, and not in a judgmental way, not in any meanness or anything like that. She was honestly curious, and she asked, what is this? Like, what caused this? So I shared my story, like I've shared in my PTSD episode, about how, basically the short version, how I was told I was dying at 20 and it wasn't true. And I told her that wasn't the only experience, but that was the worst experience that caused it. And so she listened and was very accepting, and she said she would be right back, and she disappeared again. I'm not quite sure what she did during this time. I assume she was once again talking with the anesthesiologist and probably the doctor, I'm going to assume. But she came back, and we never took my blood pressure again in the recovery room that I was in. So she instead came back, and she had these funny looking socks, and she asked me to put them on, and then got me into bed. And so she was like, I need to go check on a few things, and just kind of left me on my own. So I got my iPod out of my bag. I knew I wasn't ready to read, but I got my iPod out of my bag, and I tried to listen to some comforting music, but it wasn't really helping. And when she popped back in to check on me, she could tell that. And so she asked if I wanted my parents back there for a little bit. And I said, yes, I would very much like that. And so my parents came back and could tell that I was really nervous and anxious and struggling. So we just kind of chit-chatted about nothing meaningful. And then 5 minutes later, the doctor shows up. And I was like, oh, of course. So he asked them to step out because he would like to take my Johnny off and would like to mark me up for surgery. So he's going to do his final set of measurements and mark everything up in pen or marker or whatever. And then he is going to do the final things, and it will only be a few more minutes. So he was very good about the whole process, even managed to get me to laugh at one point. And so he did his markups really quick and had me hop back into bed and, said, we'll be good to go in just a couple minutes. So here I am expecting this to be a long, drawn-out process, and it moved really quick. So the nurse comes back and tells me that she is ready for me in the OR, and along the way I should probably make one last bathroom stop. And so I do, and we walk into the OR, which was weird, because, I don't know, you see all the hospital shows, and you expect to be, wheeled into the ER and not allowed to do anything. This was just very mellow. So we walked into the OR, and just as a side note, my sister works in a hospital, and so one of the first things I apparently told her when I talked to her after was the OR was a lot smaller than I thought it would be. I don't know. I think I was expecting a Grey's Anatomy type OR where it's this massive thing. It wasn't. It was a very smallish room. It was very medical looking, and I'm glad I didn't have to spend a lot of time in there prior to surgery, because that would have definitely elevated things more. So she had me walk in and then take off the Johnny and lay on the bed and covered me up while I was waiting. And she had me lay with my arms straight out like a T, and said that they were going to strap them down because they didn't want me to move during surgery. And so the anesthesiologist came in and introduced himself. He was very nice. And he started an IV, and the socks were the kind of socks that put pressure on your legs to keep the muscles moving so there are no blood clots. So she plugged those in and got those started, which felt very odd if you've never had those before. And then she could see that I was trying not to cry on the operating table. At this point, I was extremely upset. My PTSD was through the roof, but there was no going back. And I didn't want to go back, but I was not relishing where I was at. So she was the best nurse I've had in my life. And she leaned over and she brushed my hair out of my face and said that it was okay to cry, that Of course I was upset about this, especially with my history, and that, where I was at was not a very fun place to be, and no one wanted to be there, except her and the staff. And she instead said, if you could be any place in the world right now instead of here, where would you be? And in a previous vacation in my life, I had gone to the perfect stereotypical Caribbean beach. The blue water, the white sand, the beautiful sun. And so I told her that's where I wanted to go. And so she held my hand and told me to take a few deep breaths and to close my eyes and pretend that I was getting on a plane and that our plane was headed there. She said that we're going to get on this plane and we're going to go. So it was silly and ridiculous and wonderful and exactly what I needed. And so I did. I closed my eyes and I squeezed her hand and took some deep breaths, and then that was it. Thank God that was it. I didn't have long to wait. I didn't have a whole lot of time to stress. I mean, I definitely fit it into the little bit of time I had, but that was it. I was out. I don't know what the anesthesiologist used. I didn't think to ask in any of my post appointments, and I truthfully don't care to know, but whatever it was amazing, because we were able to go through with surgery, and I really, really was worried we weren't. I really thought that morning, right after that blood pressure was taken, that was the end of my journey. I thought that I would be sent home and told to deal. So, very thankful that was not the case. I am going to leave you on this cliffhanger because this was a very difficult part of my journey to talk about, and I have about reached the limit of what I can handle with my medical PTSD just talking about this short bit. So, to honor my own mental health and my own needs for my emotional well-being, I'm going to leave it here. I do want to take a moment to remind everyone that this surgery is a life-changing surgery. It is a medical necessity for many women. It is not just something that is cosmetic because they don't like how they look. Their bodies are physically harming themselves, and they are getting this to get healthy. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast, and I want to let you know that if you want to reach out about anything, questions, comments, concerns, share your story, hear specific things about mine, just chat and get some feedback, whatever you need, you're more than welcome, and I would absolutely love to help in any way I can. The best way to reach me is through email. It is roadtoreductionpodcast@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter @roadtoreduction. You can find the podcast on Soundcloud, iTunes, Podbean, as Road to Reduction, and it's also on YouTube as Road to Reduction. So once again, thank you so much for listening. I'm Ashley. 1 year ago, I got a breast reduction, and thanks for joining me on my road to reduction. Music is Like Music CDK Mix by CDK, copyright 2013. It's licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license.